Hi there. Welcome to another edition of Talk Stocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds. And today we're lucky enough to catch up with Michael Williams, chairman with Aftermath Silver. Trades on the TSX Venture Exchange with the ticker AAG. How you doing today, Michael?
I am doing well, as you would expect.
Yes, we've got a bit of a market. Let's not admit it. Let's not talk about it. First rule of Fight Club is we don't talk about Fight Club.
There's no Fight Club.
Short club. But it's certainly, yeah. And just to put it into context, when we first introduced the company to our audience back in May, you guys were trading under 50 cents. I think you were 42, 43 cents. I was looking back. And since then, you've had sort of an intraday high here recently of $1.42, pulled back a little bit with silver, but still well up on where we started. So good job there. Also, you're a very liquid stock. You guys trade millions and millions and millions of shares a day. So you're also very liquid as well as the price appreciation. Yep. So good stuff. So I was really excited to sort of catch up. You're a total rock star in the business, and I'm sure everybody's bugging you for your time. So I really appreciate it a little bit. But before we really dive into it, maybe if you wouldn't mind talking just a little bit about yourself. What have you sort of done? How long you've been involved in the mining industry, and maybe a success or two that you've had?
Well, I hate to admit it, but I checked this morning, and 30 years.
Wow!
I started in '96, and here we are. So it's been 30 years, and I think this is going to be my third bull market in 30 years, which is about right. That's what we can expect. But this looks like a special one. Everything's lining up. It's a perfect storm.
Great. Well, so you've had 30 years, and is there a company or two that you've been involved with that's worked out quite well for shareholders? Had any sort of takeouts?
Yeah. Before I started Aftermath, I was part of a group. I was one of the founders in Underworld Resources, which was taken out by Kinross. I think it was 2011. And what I liked about that is we put, I think it was $29 million into the ground, and it was taken over for about $140 million. So it wasn't huge, but it was on the heels of the 2008 financial crisis. So it was kind of one of the first juniors to kind of get into take over in that particular cycle. So, it was rewarding, and a lot of our shareholders made money. But what I realized, Keir, it's tough to take a grassroots project, make a discovery, transact. So then my model kind of changed, where I looked for something with ounces, tons, pounds in the ground that we can expand on. And fortunately found Barranguilla several years later. What I did originally after Underworld, which was a gold project, I felt that there was an opportunity in silver because a lot of the silver guys had become gold. They wanted to be gold miners. So nature abhors a vacuum. So I tried to fill it. And my model was, my whole life, silver was, mining life, $15, $12, $14. And I remember when I started, I think it was around $8. I always worry about silver. What happens on the low side? Is your deposit, would it still work at lower metal prices? And one way to battle that, because silver, in my opinion, is a lot harder to put into production than, say, a gold deposit, just because the values associated with the ore bodies. Look for open pit opportunities. We found two in Chile, and then we were presented with Berenguela in Peru, which has turned into our flagship. And not only is it a big, potentially open pit silver deposit, it also has a lot of copper and a metal called manganese, but the type of manganese that can be used in EV batteries. So we kind of offer the shareholders a suite of metals, including, all three are considered would be critical metals: silver for its conductivity, copper, obviously net zero, and manganese for the EV battery side.
Excellent. And thanks for giving us a bit of an overview on that. Why don't you give us a quick elevator pitch? What's Aftermath?
Well, Aftermath, as you trades on the TSX venture under AAG. We are a very liquid stock. I think might have been a top 5 last year on the TSX. We trade between 1 million and 2 million shares a day, little over 300 million out. So that's one of the reasons we have the liquidity. But I think we've built up a strong following in the silver space. We just put out a 43-101, 120 million ounces measured and indicated, another 20 inferred. So it's a lot of silver by itself, and almost 1 billion pounds of copper, 800 measured and indicated, 200,000 in inferred. And then you've got 3 tons of manganese metal. So if you add all 3 of those up, that's a significant deposit. And it's to the point now where we've got enough drilling. We have 42 kilometers of drilling there in total, so 42,000 meters. We're going to skip PEA. We're going straight to pre-feasibility, and I hope to have that out next year. But while we're doing that, we're also going to do our exploration drilling. As we went east on the project last year, I think right around the time that you and I last spoke, we just put out news that we'd hit 150 meters of 1.12% copper, 7% manganese, and 289 grams of silver. We're going to follow up on those holes and then see if we can find the source of Barranguilla, which is a carbonate replacement deposit. Maybe there's a porphyry there. The model would dictate it came from a porphyry. We just have to see, A, if we can find it, B, if it makes sense economically. But I want to know if it's there. And then about 4 kilometers from the deposit to the southwest, we have what we call skarn mineralization at surface, up to, I think it's up to 2% copper in some cases. We want to drill test that. There's a big geophysical anomaly sitting underneath it, close to a magnetite mine, just off our property boundary. But the magnetite mine, it's part of the matrix magnetite that you would expect to see in a skarn deposit. So it's got a lot of things lining up, but we'll get a drill in it. Drills are in 3 dimension. I'll have the results out probably Q2, beginning of Q3 on that. We're mobbing a drill in, I think, within a month to 45 days. I've kind of been waiting for that for a long time, because if we can make a discovery on that or the porphyry, I think you go what I would describe Berenguela, based on its resource, as a tier 1 asset to maybe a world-class mining district, if you can add other deposits to it. It's quite exciting, and it's located in infrastructure. We're close to rail, power, people, so that's all good.
And you own 100% of that project?
We do now. Yep. We made our last payment in November. We're now 100% owner. That was 15 million US. So I think we ended up paying 21 million Canadian. All 3 of our projects, Chayacoyo, which is our secondary project, that we own 100%, and Cachanel, also in Chile, we own 100%. So there's good silver leverage with us. I think Cachanel is 35 million ounces measured and indicated, with a further 10 inferred. We'd like to do further drilling to see if we can demonstrate that there's more resource there. We believe there is. So shareholders say there's a lot of balls in the air, and I think it's going to be another good year. And now with let's call it $80 silver, that's panacea for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I never thought it'd be conservative to be using $50 silver in economic studies. We probably won't see that for some time, but still pretty wild times that we're in, and good to have a company that's so well positioned. Just for some of my viewers, maybe you could explain a bit about, so Berenguela, this is an open pit style situation. If it were to, get to a place where you guys can show that it's economic, but is this mineralization like at surface? It would be positioned as an open pit if you got to sort of that stage?
Formally, the PFS will dictate that. I'll tell you exactly what the strip ratio is. But I could tell you this, if you're on site, you would be walking on mineralization. You can see it right at surface. So we expect a very low strip, but the PFS will give you the exact strip. But to answer your question, it certainly looks like that. I'd be shocked if it wasn't.
And what's sort of considered kind of a tier one, what's considered a big enough asset at this point in time, again, silver equivalency, how many ounces do you need for somebody to be like, yeah, that is something that we might want to buy?
I think the number I've always used is like 5 million ounces of silver production a year. You're considered a real silver company. To answer your question on tier one, I always say a tier one is an asset that makes fantastic amount of money in markets like we're in, makes really good money even in moderate to social markets. Tier two asset makes good money in today's market. You don't have to shutter it in a bad market. And a tier three asset is one that maybe makes a little bit of money in a good market, but you have to shutter it in a bad. And unfortunately, in the silver industry, historically, when silver went under 20, a lot of the small underground mines had to shutter. That's the advantage, I think, of having a large open pit. But bearing in mind that we also have copper and manganese, I don't want to be flippant when I say it, but you'll have a silver copper deposit that's very low cost because of the manganese will pay for it, or you'll have one of the largest manganese deposits globally at low cost because the silver and copper will pay for it. Now, I would have said that 6 months ago, but with the price of silver going up, as we do this PFS, we'll certainly put a lot of emphasis on how much silver we can produce as quick as we can, just because of the price. I think on our original 43-101, we used $25 silver. Our recent one that came out in November, we used 30 or 29. I don't know what you'll use when you go to do a pre-feasibility, because if silver's been trading at 80, you could make an argument for a lot higher price, but it's kind of what the consensus pricing is, and the bankers, tend to be very conservative.
Right. Well, anyways, thanks for walking us through that. What work are you kind of currently doing? You talked about going right to sort of a pre-feasibility that would be sometime next year. What work are you sort of doing in the meantime? What do you have kind of planned? You mentioned you've got a drill that might be doing some exploration. What specifically do you have planned to do?
We're kind of like a duck. We look very calm on the surface, but we're paddling like mad. So we just brought on Danny Keating to be our chief operating officer. He's basically going to quarterback the pre-feasibility studies. A mining engineer, he's worked with manganese previously, understands silver and copper, so well-rounded. But him and the processing team are working on the metallurgy. We're all scaling it up. So when we put out the PFS, our engineering's tight and our processing is. With Barranguilla, because you have silver, copper, and manganese, it's very nuanced and complicated. So we've got to be very considerate of every single step. Hence, we're leaving no stone unturned for that. So when we put it out to the market, everybody can understand it. But I'm going to give you a simplistic flowchart of a very complex procedure. So we are going to use hydrometallurgy. Historically, manganese made it difficult to separate from the other metals. So what we're going to do is essentially crush the rocks, produce and then pour sulfuric acid on them. This is done on site. And then we'll take out the silver through a process called Merrill-Crowe. Then we'll extract the copper through either SXEW copper or turning it into a copper concentrate. And then you take out all the deleterious elements. This is where it gets tricky, because you've got the manganese needs to be 99.9% pure. So we remove those, and then we we dry it. So we crystallize it, and then we have that's our manganese product that goes for further processing. Right now, we're thinking the United States, 93% of all manganese comes out of China processing, and the U.S. is desperately looking for their own sources, and we think we can be one of the suppliers of that. So that's kind of what we're looking for. That's what we're working behind the scenes on this year to get all those numbers so we can put them out to the market and demonstrate, hey, look, not only can we produce silver, copper, we have a manganese product that should be highly sought after. But it's easy to sell silver and copper. You can sell it to anywhere in the world. You have buyers. You have to have the right buyers for manganese, and it has to be the right product. So that's what we're working towards. But we're also working towards maximizing our silver and copper as well.
As I've heard manganese mentioned quite a bit more recently. With the race is on for critical minerals. Especially
Yep.
Western nations are starting to try to become a bit more nationalistic and have their own supply. Multipolar world. Lots of geopolitical stuff sort of going on. Has your phone been ringing? You getting some interesting calls?
You know what? That's a good question. We've been getting calls from private equity firms. It hasn't. I don't say we haven't got a lot of calls from institutions. Some of the retail investors that follow critical minerals are asking questions. So it's starting. It's not there yet. I think give it another 18 months. It'll be. Manganese, there is no EV batteries really without manganese. It goes in the cathode. It reduces the combustion largely at the expense of cobalt, but it also has more cycles than cobalt. It also has more power output than cobalt's. But the real reason, it's $2,500 a ton, let's say in Western United States, Europe, and Western countries, versus cobalt, which is 10,000. So it's a big price saving. So if even the LFP, the Chinese LFP, lithium iron phosphate battery, is now LFPM manganese. They've added manganese there to help with the productivity of the battery. So every new chemistry that we see has an M in it. So we're very optimistic of the future.
Excellent. And why don't we talk a little bit more about capital structure? You kind of mentioned right at the beginning, approximately how many shares are outstanding, who sort of owns these shares, what's management insider, any strategics, any institutions sort of own your shares. Maybe you could speak a bit about that.
Well, I think 45 to 50% of our float would be considered institutional if you consider Eric Sprott an institution, which I do. Eric, we're one of his largest holdings. He has 25% of the company. And recently, within the last year and a half, he increased from approximately 14.4 to 19.9, predicated on the amount of silver, and then became a real fan of what our thesis is on manganese, that it's there's only a few of us globally and we should be one of the biggest. And then he bumped up to 25%, where he approximately is today. So Eric's got 25%. There's probably 25 in other institutions, and then management's under 5 now. We used to be a lot higher, but Eric diluted us. So he has 72 million shares, maybe a little bit more because he did participate in the last financing. So certainly a significant shareholder. We're seeing more institutional interest. So I think we're transitioning from a retail stock to an institution.
And if I'm not mistaken, you guys did a recent sort of capital raise. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a share issuance rather than a unit issuance. So I believe it was a no warrant financing, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you could comment on approximately how much capital was raised and sort of what terms.
Oh, it was 20 million at 90 cents. I want to say, it was at 90 cents with no warrant. the CEO, Ralph Rushton, and I are big believers. If you can remove that overhead, it certainly helps when you're putting out news going forward. And, unfortunately, we existed in sort of a 5-year market where you needed to add a warrant. And it was a little bit of a flex because I wanted to demonstrate to the market that, look, we're strong enough that we can raise money institutionally without a warrant. But here, the key thing, there was no
4-month hold.
4-month hold. So it was no warrant without a hold. So the people that participate, are have the same strategic outlook that we do. That silver had a lot further to run. That we need copper, and then manganese will come into its own. So they're good shareholders. So I really liked it. Even though we're trading at like $1.04 as we talk, I'm perfectly happy with that 90-cent financing, no warrant. I'd do it again, even at today's prices.
Yeah, well, I think anytime you can do no warrant, is a great thing to do if you're going to deploy and take capital. It makes people think twice about having to sell the stock, and then I'm not sure about you. You're on the executive side, on the issuer side, but as an investor, these life offerings I find to be pretty attractive at times, because then 4 months can be a long time, especially in these parabolic metal prices, right?
You know what? Like, can you imagine
a long time.
if you had a stock with the life financing you did before Christmas and it doubles with silver going to $1.08, you'd want to be liquid. The problem from the company side is this: it's not people like you, investors like yourself. It's more institutions or hedge guys that would come in, they grab the warrant and immediately sell the stock, and they keep the warrant. Even they'd be shorting you before your financing even closed, probably. So it made a tremendous overhang, but it doesn't give you the best type of shareholders. Right now, the brokers will argue, well, it's like getting a free financing. Yes and no, without fees. If I can get the stock up to that level anyway, it doesn't matter, which I should be able to without the overhang. But, I understand it's a key part of their business is getting a warrant for their clients. But in markets like this, it helps the companies not to have a warrant.
Yeah, certainly. So with that, it looked like you also had a participant in there who took a pretty decent slug of that. I think they did almost half the financing, if I'm not mistaken. Was that Eric sort of topping up?
I can neither confirm nor deny. Yeah, it was Eric.
All right.
Yeah. No, he
Sounds
made
good. With that, how much capital, of your last publicly disclosed sort of amount, what are you able to say in terms of approximate?
I think we're right about now about 20. I want to say about 26 million in the treasury.
Great. And is that going to see you through 2026? If you didn't do another financing, would that be sufficient capital for all of the activities that you're going to be doing, all the work programs?
Yeah, that should cover off the phase 1 drill programs and get us through pre-feasibility. If we decide to do a pilot facility sometime throughout the year, maybe, which we were looking more on the feasibility side, but the way things were going, maybe we'll look at it sooner than later. Might do another raise. Not saying we have to, but we might. It depends on where we are in the markets. I don't want to always be going back for more money. We're getting to the point where you're kind of almost done. Certainly to get to feasibility, which is a key benchmark.
And let's go back to the project side for just a moment.
Sure.
What's a permitting process sort of look like? If you were to get there, what's that process look like? As compared to somewhere like Canada, is it
well? It depends what province in Canada. If you're in British Columbia, you've seen what's happened in our court system regarding UNDRIP. It kind of puts the spotlight on permitting in BC, makes it difficult. Peru is good. It's not as good as it used to be. The government keep saying that they're going to try and improve permitting times. I think that's a problem that's endemic throughout mining jurisdictions. But we always say to get our drilling permits, about 12 months. It used to probably be 3 to 6. If you're in Ontario or Quebec, it's probably quicker. But, we can live with 12 months because we can plan ahead of it. And then we do a lot of permitting at the time. I think your construction permits probably might be a year also, maybe 18 months, but they're not onerous. One of the things I always say about Latin America, and maybe it applies to everywhere, you have to have the local people on side to help with your permitting, because any big project like this, you always get NGOs trying to pick it apart and find fault and cause problems with the local people. But if you have local people on side, it helps stymie that, and you can get on with it. And the government is a lot more open to fast tracking your permitting. So I think here we're in good stead, knock on wood. But we also, one of our first hires was a fellow named Victor Grande, he's our community relations person, but he's an indigenous Peruvian. And I think that's a key thing to point out. A lot of the people in the rural areas are indigenous, and they like to talk to other indigenous people. And Victor certainly put a team together, but he was a World Bank development officer. So everything we do there is to World Bank standards, knowing full well that down the road, if you want to have these big deposits permitted, you have to have everything done correctly, which it should be.
Excellent. Well, we touched on it just a little bit even before we recorded. Maybe if you wouldn't mind, just a couple of comments kind of on the broad sort of like market, silver, precious metals. Any thoughts on we kind of commented that, maybe for us industry veterans and really investors alike, as the price of silver and some of these metals were kind of going parabolic, the stocks weren't really following suit. Maybe it's because we didn't believe that the prices would sort of like stay elevated. And even with, last Friday, a couple of things going on. You had increased margin requirements, which we know has been kind of one of the common themes that sort of ended previous rallies. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Is this a market that we can trust? What are some of the forces that you think we should pay attention to?
Well, Eric Sprott told me beginning of last year, I expected $80 silver by the end of the year. And I thought, okay, wow, if that happens, fantastic. I think silver was trading at 28.30. So, Eric's pretty tuned into the markets. And now I think long-term, Eric's projecting over $200 silver. This recent rise, I thought, got to 100 too quickly. It seemed to me short covering with several banks. So I fully expect it. And I think most of the market, maybe that's why we didn't see, we didn't even have a chance to catch our breath, and it got hammered. And it seemed like orchestrated to me. There was a lot of dumping of physical silver and a lot of covering of shorts. But now at 80, if it consolidates down here, I'm thrilled. And then, I think Eric is going to be right. If you look at the silver gold ratio, it would probably dictate, if you're a gold bug, where silver can go. But the other key thing is we've been in deficit for silver now for 6 years. We're not finding enough, and silver is the most conductive metal on the planet. We talk about AI call centers. They all use a lot of silver. We talk about military uses. Unfortunately, silver's going up there as well as we see what's going on globally, and that's unrecyclable. So I think the fundamentals of silver are strong, but I still like the fact that it can be viewed like gold or cash as a monetary vehicle. And someone pointed out, unlike paper, silver doesn't burn. I think it's still got a lot of tailwinds in front of it. And as a company, I think what you as an investor have to look to is, okay, what can we produce an ounce of silver for? So if we can produce it for under $20 and say we're getting 50 to 80, those are, I saw it written today, those are tech-like returns, which you would expect in a tech deal, and you're going to see it from mining. And that's when you'll see companies like ours start to really go parabolic, when you get, we're delivering those type of numbers. And I think they're coming. It's not a case of if, it's a case of when.
Yeah, certainly, a segment of the market outside of, exploration and development companies are producers. There's not a lot of, silver producers, but they should really benefit from these elevated prices. And we haven't yet seen that on any financials because the price moves so quickly. So,
Quickly.
yeah. So some of these numbers coming up, if everything holds, they should certainly be, some of these companies that were kind of struggling to really make money at 25, 30, dollars silver plus, should hopefully be making some pretty good money at $80 silver. And
Look,
one can hope.
If you can't make money at $80 silver, go home.
Right.
Assuming
well, as we sort of wrap up here, what are a couple of catalysts that we should be watching for here in the next sort of 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, look for drill results. I think we'll be getting that. I know it's not silver, more copper dominant, but copper's trading above 6, so it's silver's little friend right now. But I would say look to our drill results both on the eastern side and drilling in the southwest for the skarn. And I think we'll probably be putting out some numbers from Chayacoyo, the Chilean silver. So lots of drill results. And then we'll probably interlace it with some met work as that comes available.
Excellent. Well, met work is really key when you have a polymetallic deposit. As I'm sure you know from the first go around of founding a company, making a discovery, building a deposit, and monetizing it, you got to check a lot of the boxes. So that'll be
a lot of boxes.
Sounds like you've gotten ahead of it with bringing on a good COO who's a developer.
Yeah, excellent COO. It's sort of like climbing a mountain. It's not easy, but when you get to the top, the view is quite nice. So we're getting there. I can see the summit.
So you're somebody who's one of the leaders kind of the industry. Everybody sort of knows you. I'm sure, what's the velocity of check rating been for yourself personally? Getting pounded a lot on that.
Well, I'm getting, I get calls every day. The worst are from friends, right? Because they have pretty good deals and, they supported me and I don't want to say no, but it's coming out of bad markets. I've made the most money in my career and that looks like we're in the case, but I'm really good at buying here, but terrible at selling. So maybe you can help me. I hold on too long, but yeah, seriously, I think we've got a good 3, 4, maybe even 5-year run ahead of us. And just the fundamentals of supply and demand would dictate that. And we are in a transitioning world. Excuse me. So
right.
I think projects like ours are coming into favor.
Excellent. Well, Michael, sort of leave it there. Really appreciate getting a good sort of update and hearing the progress of the company. Again, for my viewers, when we had Michael on about, just under 9 months ago, the shares have rapidly re-rated. He's been able to also de-risk it with raising additional capital. No warrant. Good job.
Thank you.
And you've had a strategic increase their percentage in the company. So lots of good things to sort of look forward to, and tremendous leverage on these metal prices. So, Michael, really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on, Keir. Appreciate it.